Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Varga, and today I'll be taking you through the March 30th, 2022 release of DB Precision, version 2022.22.3.30. If you have any questions about what we go over during this video, please call 860-540-3690 or email us at support@PensionSoft.com. Today we'll be going over a number of changes we made to the application as well as to the portal. And the first thing we want to go over is a change we made to our website communication. We changed the way that all communication is exchanged between DB Precision and both the PensionSoft web server and portal servers. This is part of a broader plan that will culminate with a full redesign of the underlying DB Precision database. Moving towards the changes to the interface of DB Precision. We've added a new type of reported amount called an employee identifier that when used for any sponsor can then be referenced on the call center screen on the portal to find a participant. So if we were looking on DB Precision here, and I open my reported amounts, I have something called employee ID. And in the dropdown of amount types, the last option now is employee identifier. When we have this selected, what this means is I can go to the portal. And if I go with a sponsor open, I go to open a participant. If I go by SSN, now I'll see that it says participant SSN or ID. So if I type in a person's employee ID, it's in the reported amount section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is this person's employee ID. I can now open that person by their employee ID as opposed to having to know what their SSN is. We've added the ability to choose between a simplified and classic ribbon display. So when we're talking about the ribbon of DB Precision, we're talking about the area up on the top of the screen here, these buttons at the top. So if I go to the System tab, I can turn on simplified mode by clicking this button right here. And what you'll see is all the buttons are condensed. You still have tooltips that will tell you what the button does. So if you'd like to use this view, you can. If you want to toggle it off, you just come back to your system settings and toggle that off. We've also added support for the Office Ribbon Black theme. So if I go to File, Options, I can now select a black theme. And some users like this to avoid more light coming from their computer screen. I'm going to switch this back. We've added additional valuation data variables to the person worksheets. If I scroll down to person worksheets, you'll now see that you have a lot more options in the valuation data section when it comes to the details you can add to DB Precision or to the person worksheet. We always had the ability to add things like valuation status into your person worksheet, but if you scroll down, you'll see that you have the ability now to add all of the plan amounts and earnings and reported amounts that you had included in your valuation snapshot. You now have the ability to add those into your person worksheet. This allows for you to have more up-to-date information about calculated items, such as maybe an accrued benefit that's been calculated as of the most recent valuation, things like that. So in conjunction with toggling this to the latest snapshot that you've run, you'll be able to produce more information for your clients that are depending on portal reports to get data about their client base. Moving to plan document. We've made changes to a couple of formula functions. I'm going to go here. First thing we added was to the get reported amount function. So I'm going to click here. We've modified this function to add the ability to return the count of amounts as well as to filter items by amount value. So there's kind of two things here. One is you have now the ability to return the number of amounts, which in the return type now is a 9. So let's say I want to know how many earnings amounts were reported between 2 dates. I could use this function to say between date of hire and calc date input, I want to return using the 9 here, the number of amounts I had between those 2 dates. Additionally, at the very end of the function, you have an optional input where you can say in this case, give me the number of values where there's the number of amounts where the value of the amount was 1. So let's say people were constantly going back and forth between a 0 and a 1 for some particular field that you have stored in DB Precision as a reported amount. You know, one year the person has a 0, and next year the person has a 1, and maybe the next year they have a 1, so on and so forth. If I want to count the number of 1s that a person has in their set of reported amounts, I can use this function and say, give me the number of amounts when the value is 1. That's what this can do. So I think this has a lot of added benefit if you are looking to count things in DB Precision using reported amounts in a formula function. We also added new parameters for the get ben latest function. So what you'll see here is we have an optional field at the end of the get ben latest function now called ignore annuity. If you set this to true, then annuity benefits will be ignored when you're using this function. So let's say you want to return a lump sum amount for someone. If the person has a lump sum, return it, otherwise don't return anything. Previously, you didn't really have the ability to only return lump sum values. You had the ability to ignore lump sums, but you didn't have an ability to ignore annuities. Adding this last parameter into this function allows you to do that. Additionally, when using the dynamic indicator, which is the second to last input in the function that already existed prior to this release, when using this indicator, we now reflect benefit payment level as of the date specified. So the date specified in this function is the first input. We indicate to use 0 if you're trying to use the latest benefit as of any date. You know, a lot of times people's benefits, if they're deferred, they're due in 20, 30 years. So we do put a 0 there to get the latest no matter what calc date input is. But if you want to return the value of a benefit as of a particular date, you would change this 0 to an actual date and make sure that your dynamic indicator is set to true. And that would actually get you the benefit level as of that date. Another item that has some fairly widespread use to our client base will be the addition we made to service definitions. So if I go into a service definition, I'll now see under my service rounding, I have another input called repeating decimal digits. So the way this works is if you are looking to calculate service, let's say it's an elapsed time service, most likely. I'm measuring service using a standard 365 method or any method really that's not rounded on itself. If I'm saying I want to round the service to a nearest month, that is going to return, values that are rounded or that are calculated to the nearest 12th, 1/12, with repeating decimals. So if a client wants to actually make sure that 1 month of service is coming out as 0.0833 and not 3 repeating, they can indicate that the repeating decimals here should be 4 as opposed to having it be unlimited. And this should have some benefit when it comes to measuring pieces of service and whatnot, and not having to add a formula derived item to say I want to round my service for calculation of accrued benefits and things like that. We've also in the service definition, this is a little more of a client specific item, but if you are using bank hours in your service definition, which is not most clients, we have added the ability to, if you're using bank hours, to indicate the maximum number of concurrent withdrawal years in this input right here. For average earnings, we now support the creation of weekly and biweekly average earnings periods that do not start on a Sunday. So for any of our clients that do biweekly earnings average or biweekly average earnings and group those by year, previously we were forcing the calculation to create periods from a Sunday to the second Saturday from that Sunday. And we did have a client indicate that they were using a different period basis for their calculation. So we go into the average compensation, we go into the advanced screen. You now have this other option here. you can check the box saying that you're going to build the period starting on the provision effective day of the week. So that's why this effective date here is on a 1/9/2004 as opposed to like a 1/1 or something like that. It's because this is building periods on whatever day of the week 1/9/2004 was. If you don't check this box, the system is going to use Sunday through Saturday biweekly periods or weekly periods. For export definitions, we now use the archive type field to provide a more detailed description of when an archive is produced in both DB Precision and on the portal. So you scroll down to export definitions. If I indicate that my calculation archive type is an internet calculation, then in the name of that portal export or in the export in DB Precision, it will use the name of that archive type. So election forms or calculation requests or whatever else you may choose there. Adds a little bit more detail in terms of what it is that you're creating in the portal. Moving on to a person. I wanted to open up a person here. One thing that we did add that actually will also have a lot of widespread use for our clients is the ability to delete more than one reported amount for a person at a time. So if I open up a person's reported amounts, let's say I go to the person's base pay, we are seeing more and more clients using biweekly pay. And in some cases, you need to delete a person's full biweekly history and maybe re-import that once they're actually retiring because the old history is not valid anymore. I can go and highlight the entire range of reported amounts, and I can delete all of them now. This is not something we were able to do in the past. So this should have some widespread use for our clients that are looking to delete in mass reported amounts, especially like biweekly ones or any that are just reported very frequently, so that you can then import like a clean history. Let's say someone gives you a listing of what this person's history actually should be. You don't want to go through the import and see, have you replaced every item, or what if someone has something lingering? You just want to start with a clean slate. This would be your fastest way of doing so, as opposed to any other method we have throughout DB Precision. Also, when it comes to a person's benefit payments, you now have the ability to override withholding values to $0. So in a case of this person, Jane Doe here, this person took a return of contributions on the same date that they started receiving a joint survivor annuity. So typically, withholding information is stored in this section here. But for a person that has two benefit payment streams, you would likely need to indicate what the withholding was for each separate payment. The withholding is going to be used for each payment. So if I want to indicate that the lump sum is getting a different withholding than the typical annuity withholding, I could click into here, go to the admin screen, and I can indicate for this payment that they're having, instead of whatever's in the withholding screen, that they're going to use a $1,200 federal withholding for this distribution. And I'm indicating that I want to override the withholding on a state level to 0. That's what this checkbox is here for. Previously, if you left this at 0, there was really no way of indicating is 0 an override or is 0 0 because I'm not making a change to it. So having this checkbox here with the 0 indicates I'm overriding to 0. And additionally, we have the ability to store the non-taxable months for a benefit payment also in the admin screen. I see here I've stored 260 non-taxable months. We wanted to note that we now disregard suspensions and benefits notices, which are stored in this section here on the bottom left. If you have one stored after a person's calculation or termination date, that suspension of benefits notice will be disregarded by the calculator, although it would still be stored in the person's record for data purposes. We would never manipulate a person's actual data. If we are running a calculation for a person, we'll now see some changes to the resizing capabilities on this screen. So if I go to something like an account, I will now see a much larger display here to view the results of the account. And additionally, I can resize this screen to view the results of your formula function. On the workflow screen, we also have added the ability to resize this screen to make it larger if you do need to view more detail on your reports. And another note that we wanted to mention when it comes to people with certain periods in their annuities, when the valuation date is beyond a person's certain period, we now disregard the certain period for purposes of valuation extracts and for the dynamic FN latest function. So what this just means is, if a person has a 10-year certain in life that started in 2010, you're doing a 2022 val, that certain period is expired. So you would see now that that person's annuity is indicated as being a life annuity for valuation purposes as opposed to being a certain in life, because that certain period is now expired. And this is important to note, if you are doing any regression testing between old version and new version, you will see that that would be a change that would occur between the old version and the new version of DB Precision. We've added some functionality to the database transfer screen. So if I am in a sponsor and I go to the data tab and I go to transfer, I can indicate that I want to transfer, let's say I want to transfer from test to production. Oops, sorry, there's nothing in there. So I'm going to go backwards this way. So I'm going to go from production to test, and I'm going to add person information. And so now at the bottom of the screen right here, I'll see there's the ability to limit the transfer to people with a particular reported amount. So let's say I only wanted to transfer people with a particular reported amount. Let's say you were looking to only bring over a handful of people. You don't want to bring over everyone. This would be your way to indicate that you're only bringing over a certain subset of the population. And lastly, switching back to the plan document, for our clients that are using payment processing, we go to the Tools tab and process payments. If I've already created and reviewed a payment distribution file for a particular month, but let's say I get a last minute addition, last minute retiree, I don't want to have to rerun the payment process, and I don't want to have to recheck any results. I may simply just want to add the one person who I added a retirement benefit for. You do need to make sure that you add the retirement benefit to that person's record first. You can't simply just add a person who has no retirement benefit in their record at all to this list. But assuming that you add the retirement benefit and all the necessary components, I can come into here and I can say, I want to add a person. If I add the social security number into here, as long as I've added that person's benefit into their record ahead of time, I can then add that person into this listing on the fly so that I don't have to check anything else. Lastly, the last note we wanted to add was that we've added additional logic to the import of full name to handle situations where more than 3 names are being imported. Again, we're always trying to make sure that we're improving or adding functionality to the algorithms we use for import when it comes to things like name information. So if any time you see something that you don't agree with the way that the import controller is handling a certain change, feel free to let us know, and we can look into that and see if we can handle that situation. So that is it for today's video. If you have any questions about what you've seen today, please call 860-540-3690 or email us at support@pensionsoft.com. Have a nice day.